Alright, hello. I've got my family keeps calling or texting wanting to know updates on what's going on, so I'm just going to make a video. Makes it easier. I'm right now driving back to Chicago, going back and forth to Chicago from home, trying to keep things running smoothly at home and try to be there for my wife and my son in Chicago. Missing a lot of work, which I'm working. It doesn't mean I'm not busy working, but it's just I'm not at work, which is not really helpful for our financial situation. That GoFundMe money runs out pretty quick. I mean, when your inflation is what it is, big family, it costs a lot of money to run things. So anyway, that aside, I'm trying to deal with that stuff in the background. In the foreground, my son has been diagnosed with PTLD, which is post-transplant lymphoma, I don't know, disease. I think that's what it is. Anyway, it's basically got cancer caused by the immunosuppressant drug, which lowers the immunity. Your body's always defending itself from cancer or different pathogens. And when you're on immunosuppressant drugs, the body's ability to take out cancer before it starts growing is greatly diminished, along with other colds and things that he was struggling with. And plus, on top of that, he's got mono, which has a lot to do with this. It's a very common thing for people who do transplants on immunosuppressants and have mono. So, right off the bat, they've taken him off the immunosuppressant drugs, and we're treating his pain with Tylenol, basically. Tylenol and ibuprofen alternating. They're dragging their feet. They did a biopsy, which only increased his pain. He had a swollen or necrotic lymph node in his right hip area, a lower right quadrant. It's putting pressure on his bladder and on the vein in his right leg, which was causing him leg pain, which was mimicking sciatic pain, which is what we thought it was at first. You can see he'd been having it for a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks or so. But then he started to get a fever, started to have some other problems, which we thought was the mono coming back because he overdid his fun at Memorial Day weekend. He was out swimming and spent the night with his friends or his cousins, and then went to a town bonfire that we had in the small town we live in. Spent the night with his cousins and stayed up late. So all that was a little bit much, and I think that weakened his immune system even more. But anyway, he got a fever, and we decided, well, we better go in and get him checked because he was complaining about the hip pain quite a bit. So that's when we found the necrotic lymph node, which turned out to be a lymphoma, and they sent us to Chicago on Memorial Day right before I went back to work this last week. So today is Monday, a week later, and we found out Friday that he has lymphoma, but we don't know if it's just that one spot or if it's in other places or not, and they haven't finished all the biopsy stuff, which they said they wanted to finish that before they did a body scan, PET scan or whatever it is they're going to do. And my wife is pushing for them to expedite that a little bit. I think that they should expedite it simply for the psychological reasons. It puts a lot of stress on my wife and my son, which puts stress on me. I understand the medical side of it. I understand the urgency is not necessary. But my wife and my son don't process things logically like I do. So they're very emotionally centered. And so the problem with that is that emotions create stress, which creates cortisol, which creates havoc on your body. It weakens your immune system, and that is not helpful for what he's going through. So I think they should expedite doing that just for their psychological comfort. But that's my logical opinion, and it's not, that and $5 will buy you a coffee at somewhere. I'm not sure where. Anyway, it's not bothering me too much. I mean, it's bothering. I mean, obviously, it's not something you want to hear, but prognosis is pretty good as long as they catch it early and it doesn't involve the T cells. It's not cancer of the T cells. I think we're okay. But God's, it's all up to God and however much effort's put into this by my son and my son's doctors. So I tried to explain to my son the importance of his diet. There are certain foods that starve cancer and make it more difficult for it to grow. Berries is one that comes to mind. There's things like green tea that he's probably not going to drink because he's just a kid, but there's other things he can drink that would help starve the cancer, and he especially needs to avoid eating junk food and sugars, which feeds the cancer, and basically stick to proteins and grains and kind of go on a cutting diet, a fat cutting diet, so his body eats itself, metabolizes itself, eats up its own tissue, and in the process it picks and chooses tissues that are not needed or don't belong, which includes cancer. So if you've got damaged mitochondria or damaged cells, those cells will get eaten by your body and recycled. They'll get used by your body for the nutrients that it needs. So, but trying to get an 11-year-old kid who doesn't, he's addicted to junk food, thanks to our society. It's definitely not thanks to me. I try to discourage that, but you know how it is. Moms want to spoil their kids a little bit, and dads want to be the strict disciplinarians, and things kind of settle out there in the middle somewhere. So my wife's advocating for my son to get scanned, and I'm advocating for my son to eat healthy and exercise, get out and get sunshine, stay positive, don't be stressed, educate yourself on what you're dealing with, and do what you need to do to get better. And that applies to all of us. It's not just my son. So that's basically what's happening, generally speaking. My own stress management, I have decided to go ahead and ask my doctor for a referral for counseling. Not so much because I'm overwhelmed with stress or I think I have some sort of psychological problem. We all have some, but I don't think there's anything really that urgent or dramatic that I need as far as that goes. But I think it's healthy for me to have a neutral party to vent to and help me process what I'm dealing with, so that I'm as stable and even keeled as possible, so that I can be an anchor for my wife and my son, and get professional feedback, even if it's just to reinforce what I already know on how to best handle some of the dysfunctional things that come up during the process of trying to cope with these things that my wife and son go through and that I go through. And then on top of that, I've got my own health issues that I've talked about before, and I've had some frustrations with my doctor. Well, counseling within the same medical system, part of the medical team from my hospital, and would be a very effective way for me to address those things indirectly in a non-threatening way, if that makes any sense. So if I am in the process of expressing my concerns for my wife and my son, and my own coping skills, helping them cope, part of my coping skills is to deal with my own health issues and to get the support I need from my doctor to do that by running the appropriate tests and actually listening to what I'm saying and not just blowing me off and making assumptions and throwing medications at me. So, which I don't need and I don't take if I don't have to, and most of the time I don't. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent. This is really about the update for my son. So, this is part of the update, though. I mean, it's not just my son's come down with this PTLD. It's everything that goes with it. It's a holistic approach to medicine. It's not just addressing the specific problem. It's addressing everything encompassing that situation. So spiritually, attending church and reading the scriptures and the lives of the saints and finding inspiration and strength from those examples, and to keep the big picture in mind and perspective of life, and that we are all going to die. It's how we live our life, and are we doing it to the best of our ability and doing our part to make it as healthy and productive as possible. That's number one. And then number two, you've got the psychosocial, mental, emotional stuff, which is what I'm talking about. People asking, family support, church support, his friends in school, his extended family, people in the community. Those are all important, and they're very helpful. Love is very helpful in healing. But he's also got to deal with his own stress in a functional way, my wife as well. And we've all got to be able to communicate effectively without adding to the problem with unnecessary hostilities or conflicts, comments, little blow-ups. We want to avoid all that if possible. And then you've got the actual physical aspect of it, the fasting, the getting enough rest, not being stressed, but getting exercise, getting out in the sunshine, activities, mental activities as well as physical activities that promote health and healing and get your nervous system in the right setting. Those are all important. And so, yeah, that's the update. That's exactly what's going on. That's where we're at. And I am going to be trying, my wife and I are both, I have benefits, but I've used them up. So basically we're both on FMLA. We're allowed to take off work for these issues as they come up, and then we don't get paid for it though. We don't get any pay. They can't fire us because we're legally protected, but it creates some insecurity nonetheless, and financially it definitely creates some insecurity. Now thankfully I have some inheritance and some savings that we're using up rather quickly, which I don't want to do. So my wife and I have talked about this, and we've agreed that she will take off half the time to be with George and help him with his appointments and whatever he needs, and then I will take off half the time to do that, and she goes back to work. Because for her to miss work is $300 a day, and it's pretty close to that for me too. So not quite. She works a 12-hour shift and I work 8 hours, but it all basically comes out to be about the same gross. And we both need our jobs to get by. So I mean, we're still paying off the house and the car and stuff like that. Now, I've tried very hard to stay out of debt. I tried very hard not to keep any assets. Everything's invested or used to take care of my family, and that way I don't feel any threat of being robbed, or my identity is locked down, my credit's locked down. So, because I've been through that identity theft stuff before, that's no fun. So, you know, I've pretty much got my finances pretty locked down and secure, but it's not an endless supply, you know. We're limited. We're not wealthy by any measure of the United States of what wealthy is. We don't come to that, so that's a stressor. But I believe that God provides, and as long as my wife and I are doing everything we can, everything is going to work out one way or the other. So I've been poor and had to live with other people, and you know, have roommates and work 2 or 3 jobs, and I've done all that in my youth. So not like I don't know how that works. We'll be okay. God will help us as long as we do our part. So these are the kinds of struggles you'll have if you run into these situations, and sooner or later everybody does in some shape or form. Our parents don't live forever. Sometimes we get sick and we may have these kinds of issues. Other family members, our spouses, our children, relatives, extended family, friends, these happen to everybody sooner or later. So it's good to prepare for these situations, because it's going to happen sooner or later. And live within your means and save up for a rainy day. Be frugal, be wise. And I know that's very difficult right now with the economy the way it is, and our controlled collapse of our society that seems to be happening for the globalist agenda. But do the best you can. Try to make the best of it, and understand that it all ends eventually anyway. So live for God and glorify Him, and try to make your life in service to Him and your fellow man. That's my recommendation. And for your own battles with your own demons and sinfulness, just keep plugging away. That's what I'm trying to do. I say my prayers. I keep struggling against my vices and my emotional weaknesses and poor coping skills, and I try to improve them with prayer and faith in God's strength and help. If I try to depend on myself, I'm sure to fail. So please pray for us. Pray for me, a sinner. God bless. Over now.